Goodnight clocks and goodnight socks, goodnight little house and goodnight mouse. Do you remember this phrase? It's from a short tale called Goodnight Moon by author Margaret Wise Brown. The popular children's book was published in 1947, and yet more than 70 years later, still remains a classic in millions of households. Lindsay Reckler remembers loving the story as a kid. Now, as a mother herself, she gets to narrate the picture book to her own 2 kids at bedtime. Her family has always been big on reading and story time, and when the pandemic hit, Reckler wanted to write a parody of sorts on one of her favorite classics.
In your own living room, there was a computer and flowers in bloom and a picture of all the kids from your class on Zoom. And there was your mom and your dad working on an iPad. And grandpas and nanas.
That's an excerpt from Reckler's first book, Good Morning Zoom, that she wrote in April while in lockdown. It's a lighthearted take on what millions of Americans have experienced this year and what some are dealing with once again as several states see COVID-19 cases rise. In the book, Reckler touches on how the pandemic has affected everyday life, from virtual learning on Zoom to mommy staying in pajamas all day.
My family, we're big readers, so we read lots of books. Obviously, that's one of the ones we like. I think, my inspiration for Good Morning Zoom was just to create a parody for this time period. Things such as the pillow fort mention or board games, packages at their door. It's just daily things that we were all going through, and something that was so relatable not only to my family, but if we're living this, I'm sure everyone else is dealing with the same thing. So I really used the platform just to come up with some text that I thought kids would really relate to, and it would be a snapshot of this period in time. So to me, the book is really just a parody of our lives living through the pandemic.
Reckler, along with her husband Zach and their 2 young kids, live in an apartment in Manhattan. Back in March and April, the city of New York was one of the first places to get severely hit by coronavirus, with deaths in the city accounting for nearly a quarter of all fatalities from the virus in the U.S.
Living in New York City with 2 young kids was difficult at first, especially because of the unknown. We were one of the first states in the United States to really get hit hard, and I think we didn't know what to do. There was no guidance on masks or what should be sanitized or not sanitized, and we were living in this world where just everything was so up in the air. And, it's still so scary, but I think that first wave was just terrifying. So to be in the city and to hear ambulances going by our apartment each and every day and trying to explain to the kids what was going on was a riveting experience. And I think all of us felt that at one point in time.
Like so many families across the U.S., Reckler and her husband had to quickly figure out how to care for and entertain their kids 24/7. This meant cooking all of the meals, finding new movies and board games to pass the time, as well as arranging meetups with young friends and family members over Zoom.
One of those few moments in time where you can take one thing and everyone understands it. If you're a parent, you've probably built a couch pillow fort at some point over the last 6 or 7 months. You've probably spent a day in your pajamas or, taken a call from an iPad for work or gotten your kid to log on to Zoom and convinced he or she to sit in front of the computer for more than 2 minutes, which is a very difficult task for a 3- and 4-year-old.
Reckler says that it can be challenging to live in a small, confined space in New York City, especially as both a mom and full-time businesswoman. She's currently a managing director at the global investment bank Jefferies Group. But thankfully, her work, like some other offices, has been supportive to the unique challenges of being a parent this year.
I could be the perfect example that this book represents my real life. I got up, got my kids ready to get on a computer and had work to do myself, and there's just not enough time in the day, and if you're not leaving, then there's really no point in changing. So it really was written off of my own living room. I mean, a true sentiment to what I was feeling at that time. The first thing I thought of when trying to explain to my kids what was going on was this concept of in your own living room, because it really felt like we just hadn't left.
And many people in 9-to-5 jobs are still working remotely today. Reckler hopes that the pandemic does change the American work structure for good. The flexibility of working from home this year has allowed her to spend more time with her two young kids and not miss out on those special moments.
I think this concept that you can work from home is something that will continue to be part of our future and not just because of the world we're living in right now. I think we've all proven that you can be productive in a flexible work environment, and maybe this will afford more women the opportunity to pick up their kids from school once school's open and run back to their computer and work from home, whether it be full-time or part-time or some sort of hybrid model. You know, I think it just shows that people are resilient, and we could continue to be successful without that structured environment. And there's a lot I miss about that structured environment. Of course, as a working parent, you miss those coffee catch-ups with your coworkers. It's almost your therapy session and that human interaction. And I think we all understand that the reason we're in this position right now is because we want to make sure that everyone stays safe.
At the end of the day, health is paramount. Whatever the rest of this year and 2021 holds, we'll get through it together, one day at a time. It's important to also keep appreciating the heroes who are still risking their lives every day to help others, from teachers to grocery store clerks to frontline healthcare workers.
I kept reminding myself that we were the lucky ones to be safe inside. We're outside our window. The true heroes, our essential workers, were risking their lives each and every day to go out. And I think a big part of why I wrote the book was to make that contrast between the family safe inside and to give tribute to those who are truly just risking their lives. I mean, every delivery we received or each time we eventually did go out to go to the grocery store, there were people there who enabled us to keep living through this.
To support these efforts, Reckler has committed to donating all of her net proceeds from the first 100,000 copies of Good Morning Zoom to COVID-19 relief charities. The book is available online now and in select bookstores. You can also find out more about Lindsay Reckler and all of our past guests at viewpointsradio.org. For more behind the scenes, check out Viewpoints Radio on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. This segment was written and produced by Amira Zaveri. Studio production by Jason Dickey. I'm Marty Peterson.
Viewpoints returns in just a moment.
As many as 89% of hospitalized COVID-19 patients are at risk of a complication called cytokine storm, a leading cause of COVID death. But there's good news. Hospitals across the U.S. are enrolling patients in a trial evaluating lemzilumab, a treatment candidate designed specifically to stop this storm, even with only 1 day of treatment. Dr. Cameron Durant, CEO of Humanigen, the company developing lemzilumab.
Having a therapeutic that can significantly reduce the time to recovery from COVID-19 and send patients home earlier could dramatically impact the arc of this pandemic.
Participating in the study means access to a potential treatment option in addition to standard of care therapies. Trial participant Mark Baranski shares his experience.
I don't know if I received lemzilumab or not, but I viewed the trial as doing everything I could for my recovery while contributing to the fight against COVID-19. I certainly encourage others to do the same.
To learn more and find this trial near you, visit StopStorm.com. That's StopStorm.com.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Viewpoints is a production of MediaTrax Communications. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows and find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints. Coming up next week.
When we focus on technologies, it's often actually the affluent in society who get to adopt the new technologies, like if you think about the Tesla electric car, for example.
The state of climate science in the U.S. Then,
a fair amount of people do experience what sometimes is referred to as compulsive buying or compulsive shopping. A lot of studies now show that about 5% of all people may experience problems like that in their lifetime.
The downsides of shopping till you drop. I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.